Love, love, love till I feel the breath of the Spirit blowing in me.
Hello, welcome to the Spirit of Life program. My name is Lucy Pace, and today my guest is Tanya Lacy. Tanya is a remarkable, proactive woman who, together with her husband, has established a company by the name of Intercept Experience. Intercept Experience creates a space for important discussions to take place. Also, they also established a fundraising organization by the name of Intercept Poverty. Intercept Poverty raises funds for an orphanage based in Ethiopia, where they adopted their very precious young son, Adam. Today, Tanya will be sharing with us part of her story, her first part of her story, which is her faith journey. Hello, Tanya.
Hello.
Welcome to our program.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for having me.
Tanya, if I was to ask you for one word that would describe your faith journey, what would it be?
That's a very big question, Lucy, but the word would be knowing, a sense of knowing.
A sense of knowing?
Yeah.
Why knowing?
From a very early age in my life, I think people have observed me as having certainty about things, and I've always responded with, I just know. I have a knowing, and they would ask me, how do you know? Or why do you know? So that's where this certainty comes from. I call it just knowing.
Right. Can you give us an example perhaps of one of the earliest encounters you've had in this knowing or inner knowing?
Okay. I think the earliest memory is of when I was around 9 years of age, and I was in the lounge room with my family, and my parents had some missionaries visiting, and they were visiting the home, and there were 2 or 3 nuns or sisters, and I remember them talking about some apparitions that had happened in Garabandal in Spain, and this gave me a real awareness of spiritual things. It gave me a real awareness of the unseen world, and that linked for me about a sense of eternity. So from about the age of 9, I can strongly remember having this knowing that there's much more to this life in the seen, that there is very much an unseen world.
So it sounds like you became aware of this inner knowing through these sisters that came and talked about the unseen, or the apparition, which obviously comes from the unseen. That's quite extraordinary. What about you? You did mention to me as well in your early school years you experienced some seance, and you experienced an encounter there. Can you share that with us?
Sure. With this unseen feeling, or this sense of, I suppose even with the apparition, the story of the apparition, with that I got a sense of the unknown as having 2 sides, and the unseen having 2 sides, a good side and an evil side, a dark side. And I remember being in a seance situation where there'd been a slumber party, and the girls were excited about all these things that had happened, and they were trying to replicate the experience at school, and we were at the schoolyard. And I remember very specifically making sure I ruined the seance by opening my eyes and praying. I actually prayed to Jesus and said, please interrupt this. This is not of you. And I think I would have been maybe 11 or 12 at that stage as well. So that was that particular experience, that the unseen also has a dangerous element to it, and I was very clear about that.
Well, that certainly reveals a very strong willed character, to be able to break away from the peer pressure and to take your own path at that moment and pray into that what seemed to be a scary encounter.
Yes, yes.
Tanya, you've done quite a bit, and you've developed a very successful business, and now the Intercept Poverty. I'd like to know where and when or how did you know your vocational path, or professional stroke vocational path, to your future years?
That's really interesting, because I was someone who was regarded as an all-rounder. And I remember being in high school, being nurtured by quite a few different teachers. I was relatively good with English, good with maths, I was good with people. And that was a blessing, and it was difficult for me because I wasn't 100% clear. But it was actually a relative who became a mentor for me. And that mentor, basically, I didn't realise he was a mentor at the time, but he observed that I had very good people skills, and he encouraged me to perhaps leave school and explore some practical experiences of life in the business world. And so he created that opportunity for me.
Well, yes, and it's wonderful to know. I think everyone has some mentor that comes into our lives some time or another. But to be aware as a young woman and to listen to that inner voice, that knowing again, is obvious. It's very obvious that you do have a great awareness, a heightened awareness of your inner knowing, that inner thought process that goes on. Tanya, what about work? You left school, you mentioned to me earlier that you left school because of some belief that this mentor placed within you at the time. Can you just share that with us? We've probably got about a minute before before a break.
Well, I think the opportunity that was created was, how about you come into the work environment? And it was actually a freight forwarding company that I worked in. And in that opportunity, I could explore different elements of business. So once again, I became an all-rounder to experience different departments, from reception to accounts to sales and so on.
Excellent. I'll take you up on that point
Sure.
as we come back from the break. We're just going to take a break now, and we'll be back shortly.
Okay.
We're going to a break, as I just said, and we'll see you back shortly. Welcome back to the Spirit of Life. My name is Lucy Pace, and my guest is Tanya Lacy. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, back again.
Back on air. Tanya, before the program you mentioned about being an all-rounder.
Yes.
Can you just explain how this has grown in you and how it's propelled you into doing what you're doing now?
Okay. The experience of being in a business environment where I could be on reception or in any department was very important, because it gave me the ability to develop problem-solving skills and understand that you can be the middle person in problem-solving, that some people don't have all the answers, but if you can be perhaps the intermediary, sometimes you can ask questions and help people to come to solve problems. So being almost like a conduit between departments and things in this, as a gopher or a cadet, I really learnt a lot. So this was very crucial in developing my ability to trust myself and trust my inner knowing, because there wasn't always someone to go to ask. I was actually being asked to solve the problem, and I had to learn to trust myself and my own inner knowing. So from there, I was in a situation where my mentor was really wanting to convey a message to me that life is short. And this seemed very strange to me at the time, but it all made sense later on when he was actually killed very suddenly in a car accident. And it was about a week before this that he'd been almost lecturing me along with some friends of mine how short life is. And then when he was killed suddenly, it condensed and amplified, intensified this sense of life being short.
Sense of urgency almost.
Urgency. And so then along with this life is short theme, which had been preceded by a sense of eternity and the unseen, these together became an important formula for me in what happened next.
Wow. Yeah. Tanya, with your work, you mentioned to me too that you've been very blessed where opportunities just present themselves. Would you like to just share that
Sure.
with us too?
I think this experience of losing a mentor, I didn't realise that he actually was a mentor at the time till years later. But I was left with this sense of opportunity and to whatever life throws at you, to look at the upside. And I can recount many opportunities where I've been in a lift, I've been walking down the street, just smiling at someone and acknowledging them. Sometimes it can open up opportunities. And I've been blessed because what led from there was leaving that particular work environment. I was in a reception area. I commented to a gentleman about his tie being over his shoulder, said something like, gee, you're a very active person, engaged in a discussion, and from there I left for my appointment and he went and looked at the reception book and looked at my details up, and from there offered me my next role. And the stories go on and on about how one opportunity leads into another by being positive and happy and welcoming to and hospitable to people.
And very personable.
Yeah.
Very personable. It's as if like you treat people as if you've known them forever.
Yeah, there is a warmth there and an opportunity, and I think this is what my mentor spotted in me, was these people skills that he called them, people skills. So what ended up happening then was years later I found myself up in Queensland, and in Queensland I'd actually had been married, and I found myself in a relationship that I was not quite happy with. And so I did some very, very deep reflection. And in that reflection and prayer, and I talked directly to God and talked to Jesus and said, what is it that you have planned for me? And it was at that time that I say it was a vision, but I got a very clear picture in my head. And my inner knowings express themselves as a picture, sometimes a word, or the combination. And in this case I got a picture very clearly of me standing in front of a group of adults, and at that time I had no idea of who I was talking to, but it was very clear to me that God was in it.
Wow. And with your visions, do they happen more or less like when you see a vision, for example your podium experience?
Yes.
Does that evolve for you like almost immediately after that vision, or is it a while that it evolves into life, or how does it present itself?
Okay, well it manifests. So that particular picture I say I was given was when I was 23 or 24, and it's now at 42 that I am running panel events, standing up in front of groups, speaking to 300 people just recently. It's actually starting to manifest very, very on a big scale now, just now. So that's many years on.
So it seems like it's a long-term, the prophecy or the vision that you get gives you an insight into what you're going to be doing long-term, which encourages you and gives you hope. You did share with me when you were younger too something about the bus driver when you didn't have a car to get to work. And I think that's a wonderful story to further give us an insight into who you are and how you manage and process things.
So this was a quick story where I was working at Tullamarine Airport, and I was actually living in Hoppers Crossing, and I didn't have a car. I was 16 and I didn't drive, and so the Gull bus would come through Geelong, and I would stand on the highway, the bus would pick me up and take me out to the airport and bring me home. And there were a couple of occasions where I would engage with the bus driver and I suppose some would say negotiate, and many a time the bus driver weaved himself through the suburban streets and dropped me off.
Wow. Certainly you had an innate ability from a very young age to be able to create and negotiate your way through life. Tanya, we're going to have to take another short break.
Sure.
And we'll be back shortly.
Sure.
We'll see you back after the break. Welcome back to the Spirit of Life. My name is Lucy Pace and my guest is Tanya Lacy. Hi Tanya.
Hi.
Tanya, I'm now interested in how you have made the transition from being employed by a company to establishing your own company.
Okay.
How did that come about?
Okay. So the story of working in a freight forwarding environment where I was the intermediary, the conduit, and a problem solver. So people would come to me and ask me to research something or find out something. That's that piece. What I learnt from that was you actually don't have to be the expert on everything. What you need to know is how to ask very good questions and be okay with not being the expert. So the next place that I worked was actually an engineering environment, and the gentleman who I met with the tie over his shoulder ended up employing me, and at that time that company was looking for an engineer, and they're actually in those days able to discern whether they wanted a male or female. They're after a male engineer of around 24, and I was at that time 18 and a woman and not an engineer. So what I learned in that environment was I'd walk into companies, I'd be working with engineers, and I would say to them, you're the expert, I understand what our company does, I haven't got all the answers, what do you think that you need? And I'll go back and ask. So I really learnt the humility of asking questions. And from there I was very successful in the sales area. I blew a lot of records out of the water, and I really think that was from my competitors, if you like, were all engineers telling other engineers what they needed, and I guess that's where ego took over. In those cases where you're asking questions, you have to have a humility about you. So from there, I was actually still in Victoria. I was poached, if you like, or tracked down by an American company, a Texan company, and they were distributing their engineering equipment in Queensland, and they were looking for someone to be their regional sales manager for Queensland. So I started doing that role at 24. So at 24 years of age I was a regional sales manager, and in Queensland geographically we have got mine sites and sugar mills up there. We're driving for long periods of time. And what happened was there were some branch managers there who weren't performing in their role. But what I found was when I was one-on-one with them in the car, driving for 2 hours at a time or something like that, I could have these real important conversations about important things. So I would ask them questions about what's really happening for you, what's happening in your life, what's happening in your family, and would create the space for them to express themselves, and then together by asking questions we would problem solve. And this is where I realised when you create a space for someone and you ask the right questions,
A safe space,
you can have really important discussion that can be quite profound for them, and revealing. And so from there I thought, okay, I'd like to create a business that specialises in creating this space. So that's kind of how the transition happened.
Wow. Tanya, I can see how the Spirit of Life is really evolved you and compelled you to grow into who you're meant to be. And of course, there's much more because it's a lifetime journey. So now you've started your. Okay. Was it a matter of just saying I'm going to start my business now? So
no. Okay.
How did that present itself? We've probably got about 2.5 minutes.
Okay. So previously I shared the story of me, the vision that I received, or the picture I had in my mind of me standing, talking to many people. So I'd had the experience of doing one-on-one journeys with people in the car and managing people who were a lot older than me. So I developed confidence in dealing with particularly male leaders, and I recognised that if they were not happy in themselves, that they were impacting many people's lives. So I thought, okay, where I need to direct these conversations is with people who are in leadership roles that are running companies. So what it meant was that I had to get on the telephone and I had to contact people that I didn't know and say, I'd like to come and talk to you about something that I don't know what we're going to talk about yet, but when I get there, it could be interesting. So that was actually how I started, is I contacted entrepreneurs and asked them if I could come and meet with them and have a conversation. That was 15 years ago.
Goodness.
Yeah.
So basically it was cold calling, not really knowing how this business is going to look, but just honouring what you had experienced in that time in the car with your colleagues.
Yeah, I had a knowing that there was a need for a space, and I just started. And you know, in time, an industry developed, which got given a name of coaching, and that happened a few years later. But I was already doing this, and so I actually prayed about this, and I think the Spirit moved me, it came to me. I get my knowings in a word, and the word intercept came to me at a critical time, and that was when we set up this particular process that we use with people. We call it intercept. And I'd not been comfortable about what I'd seen in terms of psychological instruments and things that were happening, and felt this was very common sense, creating a space for people to have conversations. It wasn't really rocket science, it was just something that needed to happen.
Yes.
And so I guess on faith I just thought, well, sit down, have conversation with a leader. It will give them the space to speak about what's important to them.
Yeah. We have come to the end of our program. Okay. I can't find the words, but more than inspirational. You obviously someone that I've honoured your innate gifts, and you've got a very deep sense of presence to the Spirit, the movement of the Spirit, and we'll look forward to seeing you. You are going to come back next week, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you, Lucy.
You have been watching the Spirit of Life program. My name is Lucy Pace. See you again next week.
Bring it to birth and blow where you will. Blow, blow, blow till I be but breath of the Spirit.